we have two acute crises, the pandemic and also the economic meltdown that accompanied the pandemic. And so now we have millions of people unemployed, and the federal government needs to come in and help people who need the help, because we sort of stranded them after a while, and we need to help the state and local governments too, so that they don't have to end up laying off even more people who are providing vital services. But mainly what I've been working on has been the three ongoing crises that our country has been suffering for decades, if not centuries. And that is the climate emergency, the inequality that's grown and grown since the 70s, and also racial injustice that has been a systemic part of our society and economy. And these all three go together. So what I like so much about what the elected officials to protect America is doing, as well as what I like what the Senate Select Committee on Climate is doing, is that we're coming together because we know the policies that will create the modern, equitable, sustainable, carbon-free economy. And I emphasize the word modern because we need to create a clean energy economy that is modern and that is equitable and sustainable. And we know how to do it. At UC Berkeley, my student research team has created a sustainable shared prosperity policy index based upon 50 countries, especially the OECD countries. And it shows you the policies that do create a sustainable, healthy economy for the earth, an equitable economy for people, and caring for people. And we know how to do it. The problem is the US ranks really low on this policy index, and the European countries rank quite high, because we know the policies. And so for years, the economists have been saying, here are the policies we need to be doing. Then the climate scientists came in and said, here are the roadmaps to create a clean economy. Here's what you do. So we know that the first thing you do is you create clean, 100% clean electricity. And we know how to do that from the roadmaps that were presented in Paris. And then you electrify everything. You electrify transportation and buildings and industry, and you make it all efficient. And then you also create more sustainable agriculture that's more regenerative. We know that we can do these things in the US once we come together with and elect the officials that we have, like here today, leaders at the local and state levels that are leading us to show us how to do this. And eventually, hopefully, we will do it also soon, starting January 20th at the federal level. So let me just say that the three main points in the Economist letter was that governments must actively phase out the fossil fuel industry and move to clean energy. And that secondly, we also, in order to do this, we need the financial institutions, the banks and the insurance companies, to end their fossil fuel investments, because just since Paris, they've been putting billions of dollars into investing in the fossil fuel industry. Which really makes no sense. They're bad investments because we know we have to keep coal and oil and gas mostly in the ground. And then thirdly, the people are coming together to build their economic power base to advocate and demand this modern, equitable, clean, carbon-free economy. And so given those three main points, let me just point out, I'm a labor economist, so I do want to say, we know the just transition and how to do it, because the clean modern economy will create literally hundreds of thousands of jobs. And we know the regulations and rules and ways to make those what we call high road jobs, jobs that pay well, jobs with good benefits, jobs with training, with career ladders, so that everyone has access. And it's really important, the access part, the inclusive part, so that everyone has access, not just those in the fossil fuel industry, but those in the impacted communities, those who've lost their jobs with COVID, those in the caring economy. We need to really understand how we are going to create these hundreds of thousands of jobs when we create this modern sustainable economy, so that everybody can improve their own life prospects as we reduce inequality in this country. So let me just stop there, because I'd love to hear from the local officials and all of you. Thank you for being
Great.
here. Great to be with you.
Thank you, Professor Brown. And on the local level, there are solutions happening right now. And I'm going to introduce Megan Sally Wells. She's the co-chair of Elected Officials to Protect California, the former mayor of Culver City, and now in the city council, and just had a wonderful victory late last night. So Megan, please take it away.
Thanks, Alex, and thank you so much, Claire. I'm going to speak a little off the cuff. We were up until 1 a.m. on a pretty historic meeting where we made the milestone in Culver City of really finalizing our plan to phase out fossil fuel production in Culver City within the next 5 years. So I'll go into a little bit of detail on that, but first I'll just give a little bit of context. So Culver City is an independent city on the west side of Los Angeles, surrounded by Los Angeles. We're a community of 40,000, and we've been grappling for years and years, in fact, 100 years, with oil drilling that has been happening in our community. We've got 10% of the largest urban oil field in the United States, the Inglewood oil field. Also happens to be a field that has a major fault line, the Inglewood-Newport fault line, that's capable of a 7.4 earthquake. And there are 1 million people who live within a 5 square mile radius of this field. And, you know, when I was elected in 2012, I was really focused on making better regulations and better controlling the Inglewood oil field, because I knew this was a key issue for my community. It was a key issue for me as a mom. And so we worked for years on, well, because there have been releases, right? This is old infrastructure, oftentimes failing. And time again, our community has suffered from not only, you know, failures of, leaks and overflows and things like that, but then the day-to-day pollution of living next to oil extraction. And so we spent a lot of time looking at putting in better regulations for the field. And our community kept telling us that regulations really weren't what they were looking for. They were telling us something that I think is kind of logical, which is that, you know, it's not compatible to have oil drilling in an urban setting. It is not compatible, nor are they good neighbors to have this intensive industrial practice within just a couple hundred feet from schools, from churches, from homes, from parks. And our community has been suffering. Along this journey, you know, I was elected in 2012. You know, we went from saying that this is what's going to happen if we don't start combating climate change. And we've gone from this kind of theory to actual practice. We can see the fires. In Orange County, there are over 100,000 people being evacuated as we speak. My friend, the mayor of New Orleans, is giving out PSAs telling people how to protect their homes and businesses from the storms blowing in. So this is no longer a drill. The climate change is here. And we realized as a community that we had something that we had to do and that we could do. And so we've pivoted from regulating oil drilling to truly listening to the community and phasing it out. So last night we finalized a resolution with a 5-year phase out plan based on an amortization study. And if in the Q&A we wanted to get into some of those questions of what that means, I'd be happy to do so. And I think as a local policymaker, on my trajectory in dealing with this oil field, it's helped me to kind of connect the dots. One thing that really became clear is that, you know, it's not enough to just phase out oil drilling in my community and let it happen in somebody else's community. And so we've really, over the years, been focused on becoming less fossil fuel dependent. Last year, or the year before, we became 100% renewable. Today, we are 100% renewable city. All of our businesses, all of our homes, and the city at large. We're proving that, you know, again, this is no longer theory, like climate change. This is not theory. This is practice. We have the technologies, and we're part of a clean power authority. And so it's the city of Culver City, over 30 other cities, and the counties of Los Angeles and Ventura. And together we are purchasing clean energy, but not just that. We know that what we're doing is community centered and has to have community benefits, right? And so it's not just about the clean energy, but it's about those good jobs and making sure that we're remediating brownfields, and especially paying close attention to our most heavily impacted communities, which are communities of color. We actually have a map in California. We have the Enviro screen tool where you can map the communities that are most health impacted, and have, you know, our part of our systemic racism throughout the country, and certainly throughout California. And we can really pinpoint the communities that are the most impacted and need the most help. And that's where we're making the most investments. And so I think in creating, I don't know, I'm even in these dark days where we have, you know, so much catastrophic news on a daily basis and minute by minute basis. I think I find hope and I find strength in these local choices that are being made. I think we're proving by our actions that we reject this false dichotomy between you can either have a healthy economy or a clean environment, and you have to choose. That is absolutely not the case, especially with finite resources that we know are going away. Our labor partners want sustainable jobs. They also want to be at the table. And that's what's so exciting about the just transition, is that rather than these, you know, extractive, exploitative models that we're seeing with the fossil fuel industry, we're creating really a more regenerative, cooperative, and just economy where our labor partners are at the table helping us design our phase out of off of the fossil fuel economy. And it's exciting because we get to, especially as we recover from these incredible crises that Claire was talking about, we get to build this resilient recovery together. And in the face of such adversity, there is such opportunity. But we have to have the political will, right? We have to come together. And I think that's what the power of elected officials to protect America, that's what we're doing, is we're harnessing these local leaders and their stories and their actions on behalf of their communities, and showing how we can get it done, and we can get it done. So I'm sure there'll be more to add later, but I'll go ahead and stop there. And thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Megan. And next we'll shift to Assistant Assembly Member Speaker of the House, Felix Ortiz.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for making me part of this wonderful talk conference, because I think that it's cannot be more clear, like, to say that if we really want change, we need to make change from the bottom up. It's not going to come from the top to the bottom. And I am very happy and pleased to hear Professor Brown to talk specifically about very important and critical indicator from the economic perspective. Because at the end of the day, if we want to really tackle climate change and the issues that is happening community by community, neighborhood by neighborhood, city by city, state by state, and county by county, I think we need to talk about the impact that this climate change and specifically what the Councilwoman just mentioned about the impact they have on the health indicators in communities of color. When you see a rate of asthma, a rate of bronchitis, and the impact that that has in our healthcare system is critical. So the climate change is an issue that we all need to make sure that we continue to tackle from the bottom up. I think that I would like to thank the our sponsors and to having this conversation and this discussion, because we need to put pressure to Washington. I'm very pleased to be one of the signatories of this letter. I think it's very critical that we, as an elected official, continue to put pressure in our houses to put pressure to the Congress, and also at the state level to continue to do a state-by-state resolutions supporting not only the letter, but also to call on Congress to do what is right. I know that we are in a very interesting dynamic of campaigning, and everything probably might change or not change, whatever the case might be. It is our responsibility, and I cannot be more agreeable that with the Councilwoman that you know, we need to have the stomach, we need to have what it takes to take the stand to make sure that we do what is right. In New York, for example, I'm the sponsor of the Fossil Fuel Divestment Act. This particular bill is to in New York State, the controller of the state of New York is the one who make all the investment of our pension funds. And a lot of them go to fossil fuel. So this bill, what it will do is to try to divest any investment. And we have a close to 99 sponsors on this particular bill. And we are having conversation with the controller on the weekly basis. Because we want to come to a common ground denominator where we be able to see the controller to take the stand. As you all know, divesting fossil fuel from a big bank and big company and big investment, it hasn't had any negative impact. If you look to COVID, for example, COVID-19, unfortunately, is something that it's been hitting all our community across the country and around the world. But one of the best things that came out of this is that you have seen how in areas and places where the environment had really shaped up and the emission have really cleared out some of the pollution, the polluted area. Lastly, I just would like to say that my community, I represent in the city of New York, the area called Red Hook and Sunset Park. Those two are very minority community. Those two was devastated by Sandy. So Sandy also brought a lot of resiliency and way from how we should begin to shape up and have a different conversation about climate change. So we are in New York are taking the lead. We have passed legislation to ensure that we will have a reduction of emission by 2030. We have a very aggressive plan that put us into perspective to do that. Unfortunately, COVID hit. We have a bond for November for $3 billion to tackle climate change. We hope that we will be able to get that off the ground. And I'm here to ask any question that you might have, and I'm looking forward to continue to working with all of you and to continue to put the pressure and bring consensus about such important issue that we need to tackle for a better future of our nation and our country.
Thank you. It's wonderful to see California and New York leading the nation here with both tackling the supply side and the demand side issues of the fossil fuel dangers to our health here, particularly when the divestment side working really well with the recommendations from Professor Brown's report. And it's elected officials and policy members, makers who really are sometimes holding us back with some of the odd regulations like sun taxes and others, keeping the clean energy from getting into the economy. In fact, unfortunately, Bloomberg just put out a report that said out of the top Fortune S&P 500, sorry, S&P 100, the companies there are giving more money, twice as much money to fossil fuel than they are to renewable based candidates. But there's opportunity here. And I see Paul Evans, representative from Oregon, has been able to join us. So thank you for making it. And I'm going to pass it off to you. We're just about to round out the questions, but if you could chat a little bit about what's happening in the fine state of Oregon.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I really want to apologize. It's campaign week, and I'm in one of the targeted races, and I was running from one place to the next. And anyway, I apologize for being late. I do also want to say thank you for including me in this. One of the great pleasures of my life is that I'm actually the chair of the House Veterans and Emergency Preparedness Committee. I'm the chair of that committee with 4 Republicans and 4 Democrats. And I want to emphasize that because we pass legislation out generally on an 8-0 or 7-1 vote. We try to do things not just unanimously, but so that it reflects the spirit and the values of all involved. If a bill isn't ready for prime time, we don't push it out. If it is, then we do. And I want to emphasize that because when it comes to climate change, our committee's actually been a little ahead of the curve in Oregon. As you might have noticed, this past year, part of Oregon burned up. 1 million acres went. We've been pushing our governor to reform the emergency preparedness system over the last 3 years. Our committee actually came up with a bipartisan, bicameral approach that she stopped during the short session. We have a feeling that the wildfires and the linkage between wildfires, economic damage, human suffering, droughts that are now in their 20th year, and the shifting nature of the climate in flora and fauna in the forest really are presenting us with a requirement for change that hasn't really commingled before in Oregon. It's been a long time before so many different factors were all pointing in the same direction for significant change. I think that it is time for recognizing global climate change as the threat that the Department of Defense has already declared it, that it is a primary threat to our national security. It is an existential threat to humankind, and that it will take all approaches, not just one or two favored by this or that particular group, but all approaches to answer this challenge. And while Oregon is known for some of our environmental legislation, we haven't always been in balance with our forest management, our understanding of how to integrate long-term planning with resources. And I have a feeling that over the next several years, Oregon is going to be well positioned to actually play a larger role than we have in the complex of challenges that we face. And I've put you to sleep. I'm sorry.
Absolutely not. Thank you very much. Some people don't realize that the Department of Defense has been calling the warning sign and for many years now, saying
Even
how climate change,
yes.
Yeah, exactly, is a threat multiplier. So I really appreciate you bringing up that point and how creating a safe economy too and a prosperous economy helps around the world, helps reduce conflicts, and climate change is unfortunately disrupting a lot of the economies around the world. which creates instability, which unfortunately, as we've both experienced overseas, creates various terrorist activity.
If I could add to
So,
that, Alex, just a real
please.
quick point. One of the things that I think the people that you all represent and the networks that you have can really play a role in is making a dent in the Harvard Business School model of economics. And what I mean by that is, in Oregon, we've been trying to push that resiliency should be seen as quite frankly, as an insurance, if nothing else. That if you can actually provide corporations, maybe not the cheapest labor, maybe not the cheapest environmental standards, but resiliency support and sustainment so that even during pandemics, for example, you can continue to operate. I happen to believe that that is something that corporate boards would actually respond to. We have to frame it in the way of not just protecting our country, but in fact, protecting business profitability as well through resiliency investments. And that's the one thing to counter, I think, the 21st century Frankenomics, where everything seems to want to go to the lowest price labor, lowest price environmental costs. The problem with that is those countries don't have the resiliency to withstand catastrophic change. Bangladesh isn't going to long survive major changes. Vietnam, though I love the country, isn't going to survive major catastrophic events. I think the real strength of our country moving forward, we have to put that into the vision, and it will also come from pushing economists to recognize that, just like in the tragedy of the commons where there wasn't a value on the fish, and we recognize when you put a value on carbon, we need to put a value on resiliency as well.
That's an extremely valuable point. And I think something that I don't know, Claire, if you want to add to that. I saw you nodding your head.
Right. No, I think that's right, because the way economists can easily do it actually is to have a dynamic vision of going, nothing is permanent. We know that in economics. And so the minute you get rid of this sort of static equilibrium idea and you have a dynamic model, which we can do easily, then all of a sudden resilience is part of the model. It's innately built in. And I absolutely agree with you that I think one of the things the pandemic has taught us is that we really do need to build up our, when we say infrastructure now, we even mean the public health infrastructure, which we pretty much let go to waste. And the resiliency is a critical part of that. But it would show up when also we get away from thinking of economic performance as just the GDP or the market output, but we look at it much more as like the well-being of everyone, including not people, companies, the economy, and all of our communities. That we don't care about average income per person, we care about the distribution of all of our resources as we talk about sharing prosperity. But I love the way you talk about bringing in resiliency. That's a terrific point.
Yeah. And we're seeing this right now. I mean, the recent UN report showed that the last 20 years have been twice as deadly when it comes to the economies, the lives lost, and the disastrous storms as the previous 20 years, which is unfortunately, it's happening right now. So with that, we're going to open it up for questions. So we'll take a couple minutes to do that. You can put it in the Q&A box, which I see a number of you have already, or you can just request to speak and we'll add you to the screen and you can ask a question in person as well. All right, the first question we have here: in the midst of a pandemic, when people are struggling to pay their bills with little to no chance of a stimulus support coming, how can you call for phasing out oil and gas jobs with so many people already hurting?
I think the problem with thinking about it that way is that we need right now to help people in this short-term economic crisis. We had an economic meltdown with the pandemic and our country didn't handle it well. And so what we thought was going to be a fairly short-term depression is actually now becoming extended. And then we stopped helping people. We had inadequate unemployment insurance. We knew that. And then we didn't keep going with making that happen. But we aren't talking about shutting down fossil fuels jobs today. We're talking about a just transition. And so right now, we really do need to help the people suffering from job loss and from sickness and so forth. We really do need to deal with the economic crisis and the pandemic crisis right away. But the whole idea of where we transition in a just transition to a clean economy, that takes, as our city councilwoman from Culver City pointed out, they have a 5-year plan. It's great. Labor's at the table. You bring in labor, you bring in experts who know the policies at the state levels, and then you also have certain federal regulations that you request, and it all comes together to help the just transition. But it won't happen in a few months, whereas we really do want to get people back to work, and we really want to help the cities and the counties get the funds that they need to pay their payrolls right now. So I see those as two different time elements.
I think
I'll
you
add-
answered.
Oh,
Please
sorry.
add to it.
If I may, I'll just add real quickly that, you know, we've saw the price of the barrel of oil go negative, right? So this is, you know, market volatility has always been a thing, right? No matter what we do. But when we have a planned transition, you know, what's really good for people in our budgets, I know for the city's budget, is stability. And when you're planning the transition, when you're working with your partners in labor and you're building out new infrastructure, you actually have a pathway outside of the normal volatility of you know, oil is not just local policy, it's geopolitics. We know that, right? And what we're trying to build is local resiliency. And that is better for our economy. I'll add too, in terms of resiliency, you know, with our Clean Power Alliance here, what we see with the catastrophic fires that we're going through on the West Coast is, you know, how dangerous our energy infrastructure is, and a lot of the electrical infrastructure that's causing a lot of these fires. And so building out distributed energy resources is incredibly important, and creating those microgrids, local energy sources. The system itself is antiquated, and it is not serving, especially the climate crises of today, and certainly not our economy right now. And so this is really a huge opportunity to build out that economy, to bring workers to the table. And by the way, there's a lot of jobs in taking out that infrastructure. We're talking to United Steelworkers right now who are working in refineries that are shutting down and failing and laying off people, who are interested in helping us remediate these old oil field infrastructure. There's going to be years of that. And as we take that old infrastructure out, we're also training up for the energy that will sustain us and will sustain their careers.
Paul, did you want to share about what you're doing in Oregon without the
Yes.
federal support and the jobs?
Thank you. So we in Oregon, we're not a very large state, but we're along the West Coast, and we're certainly affected by the economics of the globe. We have 3 assumptions in place, and then I'll tell you what we're trying to do. The first assumption is that even though, to the question with the impact of the economy on these folks currently, we have not supported them sufficiently. And in the sectors of the economy that have been able to continue, in Oregon, construction is one of the biggest sectors that has been able to continue, but it has been able to continue largely because of the liquidity of some people having the ability to put on a deck or put on a roof or put on the things that during this pandemic seem to make sense given their budgets. We are seeing a slowdown in the construction industry. Obviously, construction industry does better with commercial building. That's slowed down obviously because of production flow, but they're also slowing down, we assume, on the home construction side. So what we're planning on doing and trying to push through is Oregon has something called the State Accident Insurance Fund, which most states have something similar. we are leveraging, we're going to put forward a piece of legislation that allows us to borrow on a 10-year basis, $2 billion, zero interest, but it's a loan, it's not a takings, so that the companies that will benefit from keeping the economy going are partners in the effort, and using that $2 billion on infrastructure, some of which has to do with the electrical grid and some of the energy renewable projects that are necessary for long-term infrastructure. Our immediate concern is not just that we're going to be in a long recession, but that if the construction industry does what it did during the Great Recession, where it literally stops, it's about a 5-month process to get them started again. So we believe that actually the state can benefit from both the, quite frankly, costs of materials during a recession and depression, generally they're lower, and get better per cubic foot of infrastructure development pricing, and keep our workforce still hammering hammers and pouring cement and doing the things necessary to move us forward. The thing that I think is not necessarily being talked about throughout the country, even during this election time, is we've put 20-some trillion dollars in debt, and what do we have to show for it? We are entering a new age where infrastructure resiliency is in fact going to be, I think, the thing that makes the difference between the winners and losers in a global marketplace. And I think now is time to have a massive infrastructure program to actually accelerate the plans that we've been talking about for years. I think the national will be there as long as we have a jobs program that allows us, at the end of the day, after we go in debt, to A, build businesses that can pay that debt back faster, and B, have an infrastructure that actually moves us forward as a country and as a community. So that's what we're trying to do in Oregon.
Yeah, absolutely. And building that clean energy infrastructure helps us lead the world in it. And then other countries come to invest here. And this kind of all encapsulates some of the question that Brian Dabbs asked. He said, "Hi, Claire, how do you ensure that the green economy workforce is unionized or otherwise secures more labor safeguards?" And with that, is one thing we have at EOPA have been looking at. And what's interesting is that a 2020 U.S. Energy and Employment Report said, overall, you have about 6% of wind and solar generation is unionized. But interestingly, that's not very different than the fossil fuel industry in many places. Work to produce oil, coal, and gas is 2%, 1%, and 3% unionized respectively. So what you have here is sometimes on a national level, it's different on the local places where those jobs are vital to a lot of people's everyday livelihood. And it's a challenge to transition it out. But on a national perspective, fossil fuel is roughly the same, not actually that bad, is actually smaller than the renewable energy. So Claire, do you have anything else you'd like to add to kind of when we transition these jobs, making sure that they're not just, hey, low paying minimum wage jobs? You're muted, maybe you can mute.
Thank you. Yeah, so actually at my research institute at UC Berkeley, we came out with a report about high road jobs in the renewable energy sector as we transition from fossil fuel jobs. And it does a great job of laying out what we already know how to do at the state and federal level to have the right regulations in place and the right programs in place to create high road jobs. Because as Paul Evans pointed out, the last thing we want is this creation of trying to keep cost as low as possible by having lousy jobs, because we know how to actually do that. And to be honest, I think that we have to realize once again, Alex, that the deficits that we're running right now are largely attributable not just to the stimulus package, which is about half of it, but to the tax reduction package that they passed before the COVID came in. And it benefits rich people and rich businesses. It doesn't help it doesn't help 90% of America, and it doesn't help small and medium-sized businesses. So we have a serious problem that we already created this enormous deficit that got nothing for it except redistributing money to richer people and companies. And so we know we can actually undo those deficits. And so I just want to keep emphasizing that, in fact, we have lots of examples of good policies of how to create good transitional policies. For example, I'm from Richmond near a Chevron refinery, and Richmond wanted to have a lot of solar installations. So what they did is they went to the union, the Steelworkers Union, and set up an apprenticeship program to train workers to transition from fossil fuel over to solar installation. And that program's been very successful. Those workers are unionized, the companies are doing well, and the workers were really so happy to be working not on fossil fuels, to be honest, because the only reason that when I talked to the steel workers, the actual workers doing the work, about why are they, so anti clean energy, and they said, because our bosses keep telling us we're going to lose our jobs, we'll be unemployed, we'll be poor, we won't be able to take care of our families. So of course we're scared, and therefore we go against clean energy. But if you showed us a plan, a local plan, such as Megan pointed out, remediation, tons of remediation work to do here. And in construction, we have so much work to do to make buildings energy efficient with clean energy. So there's enormous numbers of construction jobs. And so if you look at any of these job plans, you'll see a lot of jobs in construction. And we know how to actually have the regulations where whenever you have government money, you require prevailing wages or unionization or something that makes jobs good. And so if you look at these plans, you can see how we can come together to help transition from jobs in the fossil fuel industry to alternative infrastructure, green infrastructure jobs, and how we can do it so that employers actually create good jobs and train jobs and don't try to just create crappy jobs where the money ends up going to the executives and not to the workers.
Thank you, Claire. We're running towards the end of the time here, but I would invite if the speakers, if you have a time afterward, to a couple one-on-one sound bites that we're happy to send out to the media afterward. That would be wonderful. And then Felix, do you have anything to add there, please?
I would like to follow up on the professor's comments, which I think is go line on line with the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act that was signed in New York in 2019, which states that one of the goals is to combat climate change, but also to ensure that jobs in the areas of wind energy and renewable energy, those jobs will also 30% of them will go directly to community of color to ensure that training will be developed toward that. And the and the goal of that is to ensure also that that is the average the minimum salary will not be under $15 an hour. So so we do have created some parameters within this piece of legislation that moving forward to ensure that people will be protected, not just in the minority community that being impacted the most, but also in general terms around New York State.
Thank you. Obviously, the whole theme here is it's a false choice to be choosing between fossil fuels and the economy. That's a narrative that has been set up by the fossil fuel industry to combat us moving into a clean energy economy. The irony is that they could choose to transition with their capital too. But we are unfortunately not seeing that in many places. So it's inspiring to see economists like Claire actually lay the plans out for us and show how this is succinctly possible to do it that elevates everyone.
If I could add something, Alex.
Yes, please.
One of the challenges for states like Oregon that have 80% of our population in the Willamette Valley and the 20% is spread throughout the 10th largest state in terms of area, is that for a long time, we've not been able to frame energy independence, global climate change strategies in ways that rural people can connect with. One of the things we're trying to do and this is why I truly believe it needs to be a national declaration of emergency, is because going back to World War II, when it was a live or die situation, the nation is at war against a common foe, it allowed creativity and it allowed a level of personal connection. So what we're trying to do is form something called the Western Oregon Regional Carbon Sink, to plant 1 billion trees over the course of a decade, to raise the sequestration value that we can offer the country should we actually get in the Paris Accord. But we're also looking at finding ways to involve the folks who used to cut timber, the folks who used to do things that aren't necessarily as favored now, in the solution, in victory forests and in victory gardens, and in planting things that can be seen as still out in the woods, still part of their culture, but just shifted different than what they were used to. A way of adjusting their culture without challenging it. And I honestly believe that these victory forests, where you basically have small communities using land that otherwise isn't being used, having kids and young people connect, seeing that they actually can do something. Because sometimes I think the problem is so large, people just find an excuse to say, well, I can't do anything about it. In Oregon, we're trying to find a way to connect with rural and urban and suburban to say, look, this is shared enemy, shared mission. How do we find a way for you in your particular circumstance to feel a part of it? And it may not be exactly as we anticipated, but if we're still moving the ball forward and getting more people recognizing the need for change, at the end of the day, I think we can create that national movement to force companies to do what's in their best interest.
I like the term victory forest, going with the victory gardens. It is true. Something like 40% of our local produce during World War II was grown from people's local gardens.
Yeah.
And it seems like such a foreign concept right now, but that was the reality. And we can get back to creating the local solutions that have a national impact.
Yep.
Great. Well, thank you everyone again for taking time to join us today. If you have any follow-up questions, please email me, alex@protectingamerica.net, or give us a call, which is on the release. We'll send the press release right out after this, and we will also clip together some video clip highlights from the press release you can use in your broadcasts. The panelists can please stick around. We'll do a couple one-on-one sound bites that we can send out. Great. It looks like all the media have now left. Yes. All right. So if we could just do a kind of quick round robin where you have like 1 minute soundbite. Say you're going to put something on social media, Facebook. What would that? What is the importance? And maybe a clip of like what? So maybe a quick why this is so really important, and the what you're doing to address it.
About the organization or about the topic?
About the topic here. And obviously we know that we all love to talk a little bit, so keeping it short will be great. But if you want to redo that 1 minute, we can easily take another minute and do that too. Who would like to go first? Give it a shot.
Maybe we should go in the order we did already. I thought that worked really
well. It's like a good plan. So Claire, would you like to kick it off?
Sure, because I'm not an elected official, so hey, I'm just an economist.
Well, you're the most important, Claire.
Okay. So okay. Today, with the climate emergency being our most important problem in terms of we are killing the planet by using fossil fuels, and then we're also trying to deal with our ongoing crisis of inequality, racial injustice, and then we, of course, need to get people back to work and keep them healthy to end the very short-term crisis, we hope, of the pandemic with the economic meltdown. But climate is driving what we have to care about right away. And fortunately, by dealing with the climate crisis, we are also have a chance to reduce inequality and improve our racial systemic problems. So let me just say, we know how to do this. And here's what we can do. We can create 100% clean energy and get rid of using fossil fuel energy. And then once we do that, then we electrify everything. We renovate buildings and industry and all of our transportation modes, and we create a modern, sustainable, shared prosperity economy. And we know how to do this also in terms of creating hundreds of thousands of really good jobs as we transition people out of fossil fuels, as we especially help the communities that have been especially impacted by pollution and by the fossil fuel industries, and also help everyone who has really been impacted by losing their jobs with the COVID crisis. So we know how to come together, create really good jobs for hundreds of thousands of people while we create the economy that we need, which is modern, which is clean, and which is equitable. So together, let's come together and make it happen.
Well stated. Thank you, Professor Brown. I think it's a good model for the rest of us, right? Great. So you can stick around and listen to everyone else that's here. We can chat, or please, if you have obviously a busy schedule, probably jump on out. But I do want to thank everyone so much for really taking the time to do this, especially in the time campaign worlds too.
So that would be Megan next.
Yes.
Great. The fossil fuel industry keeps giving us this false choice between a healthy economy or a healthy environment. Right here in Little Culver City, we're proving that that's just not true. We are phasing out fossil fuels. We have already transitioned to 100% clean, renewable energy. And in the process, we're creating good, sustainable, healthy union jobs in the process. With our labor partners at the table, we are creating the energy, not just future, but present, that we need to power our community. And we're doing it while also protecting our community, our health, our future on this planet. And this type of building together our resilient community is really the answer, both to the economy and to our environment.
Great, thank you, Megan, and congrats again. I cannot wait to follow up so we can you please send your release to us as well so we can recirculate that and get it on our news magazine as well. Great.
Yeah, I don't think the city's put anything out, but probably a Sierra Club will.
Yeah, we'll track it down and we'll write something up too so we can get that out. So great, and I'm sure my mom will ask you for a quote. So.
Great. All right. Thanks, everybody. Nice meeting you. And Paul, my dad lives in the Applegate Valley, and so he's been doing a lot of work on bringing together environmentalists and forest management folks, and it's been a pretty productive dialogue. So thanks for your work. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it. Get some sleep, please. All right, Felix. Unfortunately, you're still muted.
Can you hear me now? Good.
Loud and clear.
Loud and clear. Okay. So let me just first thank the elected official to protect America for holding this roundtable. I think this is important, especially that we are doing a cross section from New York all the way to California and in between. I do believe that one of the most important things that came out of here, out of this conversation, is about the unity to tackle fossil fuel, and that the tackling fossil fuel will not bring any kind of desperation negatively to our economy. It's the opposite. Will bring and flourish our economy and growth our economy state by state and city by city. So the time has come where, with all the COVID-19 and all the challenges that we having today and ahead of us, that that fossil fuel does not belong in our investment. New York State, for example, has taken the stand of introducing legislation as well that any contract that the New York State agencies do with any corporation that deal with fossil fuel, they need to unveil those corporations. I think first of all, in order for us to tackle fossil fuel, start with us by regulating, by developing legislation that make common sense, that are economic, make economic sense, as well as to ensure that we protect employees. We deal with it, we work with the unions, and we will be able to move forward to have a clear understanding. What are those jobs of tomorrow? Renewable energy. We need people to make sure that they be able to fix the wind energy. So we need to make sure that we have our institution ready to tackle and train our people in our community. So thank you again for having me. This has been an amazing conference today. And I would like to thank the professor, because without the economics individual sitting in the room or sitting at the table, we won't be able to really show the economic feasibility study that is needed in order to prove that fossil fuel does not belong in our city, in our state, in our country, in our globe. Thank you.
Okay. Well said, Felix. Thank you. All right, Representative Evans.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I happen to believe that as an elected official, the most important thing that we are ever called upon to do, whatever the office, from national to state to community, is the protection of our people and our place. And when it comes to the existential threat to humankind, the most important threat to our national security, in fact, what I happen to believe, the challenge of the 21st century, global climate change, there's no more room for putting it off. There's no more room for trying to confuse people by fixing blame. It's now time for us to recognize that it took a long time to get here. There's lots of blame to go around, but the most important thing is for us to recognize the challenges ahead and to have the strength of courage, the strength of community, and the strength of commitment to move forward and make sure that our country leads the world in combating global climate change. We don't have a choice anymore. Our back is against the wall. And I happen to believe Americans in specific, humans in general, always do best when our back is against the wall. I hope to play a small role in moving forward. I'm proud of what Oregon's doing. I believe after this election, our country hopefully will regain its rightful place as a leader in energy independence and global climate change efforts. And I am grateful that we have the opportunity to do what we must. There is no alternative. We must win this fight, and I'm looking forward to the work ahead.
Well stated. And again, I really appreciate you taking time from the campaign trail.
I'm sorry I'm late.
I know it worked out fine. We were able to, you jumped in there right at the right time to be the final speaker. So, hey.